Let's pause for a moment to think. Every day, without realizing it, we buy an invisible product that produces nothing tangible yet generates the biggest profit in the world. What is it, you ask? Debt. And far from being a neutral, ordinary tool, it is a factory deliberately designed as the most profitable product in human history. It has financed wars, toppled empires, bound nations to itself, and silently drained the meager wealth of the common people. If you ask most societies, where did debt come from, whose idea was it? They would be utterly stumped. Yet the story of debt is not just a dry history of economics. It is the very story of money and power. In its simplest form, debt is nothing more than a promise. You borrow today, and you agree to pay it back tomorrow. But hidden inside this innocent promise is a vicious parasite called interest. What we call interest turns the future into money today. For thousands of years, humans struggled with this plague. Ancient Mesopotamians recorded debts on clay tablets, but every once in a while, they would declare a debt amnesty and smash the tablets. Because leaders knew that if too much debt piled up on the backs of the citizens, the system would inevitably collapse. In the Hebrew Bible, the cancellation of debts is commanded every 50 years. The logic was simple. Debt is dangerous. If you lose control of it, you can enslave an entire population. But as history marched on, clever elites figured out how to use debt as the ultimate weapon instead of wiping it away. In medieval Europe, the Catholic Church officially banned usury, charging excessive interest, but merchants and bankers quickly found a loophole. They disguised loans as trade contracts or invented complex credit arrangements that looked like anything but a loan. By the time the Renaissance arrived, powerful banking families like the Medici in Florence built their empires not on land or armies, but on the power of lending. They financed kings, popes, and merchants, gaining political influence in return. Debt was becoming much more than a financial product. It was the engine of power. The real breakthrough happened in the 17th century with the rise of state debt. As the Dutch Republic fought for independence from Spain, it raised money by selling bonds to its own citizens. Investors could buy government debt, collect interest payments, and trade these bonds just like property. All of a sudden, war was no longer limited to the gold or silver in a king's treasury. It could be financed indefinitely by selling the future. The perfectionists of this model were the Dutch, and England quickly copied it. When the Bank of England was founded in 1694, the national debt was institutionalized as a permanent fixture. Governments no longer just borrowed in emergencies. They lived in debt, passing it down from generation to generation. And the bankers who managed this debt became indispensable to royalty. The profits were staggering. Lending to governments was the safest bet in the financial world because states could simply jack up taxes to pay off their creditors. Wars that once bankrupted kings could now be endlessly financed. In turn, these wars expanded empires, opened new markets, and created opportunities for even more borrowing. It was a flawless cycle. The more nations fought, the more they borrowed. The more they borrowed, the richer their creditors grew. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the bond markets of London, Paris, and Amsterdam were the beating heart of global finance. Armies marched, ships sailed, and colonies were conquered, all on borrowed money. But this wasn't just about nations. As industrial capitalism spread, ordinary people were pulled into the web. Railways, factories, and infrastructure projects were built with bonds and bank loans. Workers earned wages from debt-financed companies, and then went on to borrow money themselves to buy houses, tools, and eventually consumer goods. Debt seeped into every single layer of economic life. By the 20th century, debt was no longer just a tool for governments or the wealthy. It had become a daily product sold to the masses. Mortgages, car loans, credit cards. The entire architecture of modern life was built to normalize borrowing as the default condition of existence. And here is the hidden genius, or the hidden cruelty. of it all, debt doesn't just generate profit once. Every interest payment is a relentless, repeating wealth transfer from the borrower to the creditor, from the majority to the minority, lasting months and years. Unlike a product you buy and consume once, debt is designed to be permanent, locking you into a never-ending cycle of payments. A 30-year mortgage on a house ends up costing 2 or 3 times the list price. A credit card balance rolled over month after month grows faster than your ability to pay. What starts as a promise turns into a trap. Therefore, debt is not just a financial arrangement. It is the most successful business model in history. It requires no factories, no inventory, no raw materials. It generates wealth out of time itself. Those who figured this out earliest, the Amsterdam merchants, the bankers of London, the ancestors of Wall Street, became the architects of the modern financial system. This system doesn't just manage debt. It manufactures it, expands it, and makes everyone dependent on it to survive. By the mid-20th century, the 1944 Bretton Woods agreements institutionalized this reality. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank were established to lend money to countries in crisis or development, but behind the lofty rhetoric lay a simple mechanism: debt as a tool of discipline. Countries could borrow, but only under conditions dictated by their creditors. They were told to slash spending, privatize everything, and restructure their budgets. Debt wasn't just profitable, it became a lever of political control. At the same time, a quieter revolution was taking place in the daily lives of ordinary citizens. In the decades following World War II, banks discovered a way to sell debt directly to households, not just governments and corporations. Home ownership became the ultimate aspiration of the middle class, but it required signing a 30-year contract of servitude. Car loans, installment plans for furniture, and ultimately the crown jewel of our lives, the credit card, turned debt into a standard consumer product. The psychological shift was profound. Debt was no longer shameful or rare. It became the normal way to participate in prosperity. Buy now, pay later. Enjoy life today and let the future sort itself out. For banks, this was a gold mine. For governments, it created the illusion of endless growth, keeping consumer demand fueled even when wages stagnated. The danger was that the entire system became hooked on continuous expansion. Banks didn't want loans paid off quickly. They wanted debts constantly renewed, refinanced, and extended. The longer people stayed in debt, the more profitable it was. Politicians also learned that borrowing was easier than raising taxes, passing the bill on to future generations. By the 1970s and 1980s, the bill came due. Developing countries in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, heavily indebted during the boom years, suddenly couldn't make their payments when Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker sharply hiked interest rates. When Mexico announced it couldn't pay in 1982, the debt crisis exploded. The solution: more loans from the IMF and World Bank, under even harsher conditions. Debt had become a trap. You borrowed to survive, then borrowed more to repay, losing more and more control over your economy with every cycle. In the developed world, banks found new ways to package and sell debt. Mortgages, loans, and corporate bonds were bundled into securities traded globally. Wall Street stopped producing goods and became a factory for debt derivatives. The 2008 financial crash was the logical conclusion of this madness. Trillions in mortgage-backed securities collapsed. Ordinary families lost their homes, jobs, and savings, while the banks received bailouts. Years passed, but debt didn't shrink. It exploded even further. The crisis was solved by creating even more debt through central bank interventions and ultra-low interest rates. Today, global debt exceeds $300 trillion, more than 3 times the world's annual economic output. Young people start life with tens of thousands of dollars in student loans, and inflation acts as a hidden tax that quietly erodes the value of money while preserving the nominal power of the debt system. And the scariest part is right on the horizon: central bank digital currencies. Imagine money that is programmable, traceable, and controllable at the code level. Loans automatically approved or denied by algorithms. For creditors, this is efficiency. For the debtor, it is the absolute end of freedom. The clear lesson of history is that debt is never neutral. It is a flawless trap that turns time into money and funnels our hopes into an upward flowing river of interest. True wealth means minimizing your dependence on this system, questioning easy credit, and realizing that behind every loan offer lies a machine designed to profit from your future. From the clay tablet of Mesopotamia to the digital wallets of today, the story remains the same. Debt enriches the creditor, burdens the debtor, and reshapes the world in favor of those who control the flow of money. And the most ruthless trick of all is that we have learned to celebrate it, calling it progress, and mistaking borrowing for prosperity. If you enjoyed this, please leave your thoughts in the comments. Best regards.